Hello there, my name is Matt Tuchfarber, and this will be a presentation on Wi-Fi security. The first half of this will be on encryption and authentication of Wi-Fi networks, which will be discussed by me. The second half will be on attacking Wi-Fi networks, and that will be taken care of by David Washburn. Alright, for encryption and authentication, we will be discussing the standards that most Wi-Fi networks will use. First off, we have WEP. It was first standardized in 1997 and stands for Wired Equivalent Privacy, though nowadays it is far from that. It uses a static shared key. What this means is that there will be a single key that is used on both the AP and all of its clients. The AP is your access point or your wireless router. If this key ever needs to be changed, since it's the same key, it must be done individually on every client. There are two types of authentication for it, open and shared. And while counterintuitive, open is actually more secure. Open does not verify that the client knows the key and will instead start sending encrypted communication. So if the client doesn't have the key, it won't be able to read it anyway. In contrast, a shared key verifies that the client has the key first. However, due to the way it handles this, it's actually less secure, which we'll see. The key, the AP verifies that the client has the key by sending a challenge response text, which the AP sends a clear text packet to the client. The client responds by encrypting that text and sending it back to the AP. And if someone could see that traffic by analyzing the encrypted and unencrypted text, they can derive the key from that. The encryption uses an RC4 stream cipher. And the key is either 64-bit or 128-bit. Both use a 24-bit initialization vector, which is chosen at random from the stream. With a 24-bit IV, there is a 50% chance that it will repeat in packets after about 5,000 packets. This means that if you sniff a network with enough traffic, you can find multiple packets with the same IV and attempt to crack it. WPA is the successor to WEP, and it stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access and was standardized in 2003. WPA was meant to just be an intermediate standard until WPA2 was finalized the next year. Its main benefit is that most client hardware that could handle WEP could be upgraded to WPA via a firmware flash. However, due to the extra work on the AP side, most APs were not able to be upgraded this way and had to be bought new. WPA uses the Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, or TKIP for short, for its encryption. This creates a new 128-bit key for every packet that's sent out. It is also based on an RC4 stream cipher. WPA2 was the follow-up that WPA was waiting for. It was standardized in 2004. This is the first standard in which all hardware must be certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance before advertising its WPA2 support. For encryption, it uses an AES-based encryption called CCMP, which stands for Counter Mode Cipher Block Chaining Message Authentication Code Protocol. So naturally, people called it CCMP for short. There are two standard versions of key distribution for these systems. There's WPA PSK, which is also known as WPA Personal. This is the common wireless used in homes and small businesses. You know, the standard, hey, what's your Wi-Fi password setup? That question works because there is a single key used on all the clients, which can be 8 to 63 ASCII characters long. Most people don't want to type in a 63-character password on their phone, though. This protocol can be used on both WPA and WPA2 networks. WPA Enterprise is what's used at larger businesses, enterprises, or anything that needs the functionality. It's often commonly called 802.1x, just to cover all the standards. It requires a Radius server for authentication. Radius is Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service. Since it authenticates users or instead of a key, users can be given or revoked access quickly. It also prevents against dictionary attacks using the key. Dictionary attacks against the key. Authentication is handled by EAP, which is Extensible Authentication Protocol, of which there are many prominent versions. There's LEAP, EAP Fast, and PEEP, and a lot of others. If you've ever had to manually configure something on UC's network, you know that they use PEEP. And then WPS is the last standard that we'll talk about. It stands for Wi-Fi Protected Setup, and it was created for those that are less technologically literate so they could take the advantage of a secured network instead of leaving them open. There are two common setups. The first is a pin setup, which often the pin is physically located on the AP. It's written on a sticker attached to it. It's an 8-digit code, and you have to input that code on your client device. The other option is the WPS push button setup. It is often a physical button, although it can be in the software, that is pushed on the AP. It will then attempt to authenticate with a client. A button must also be pressed on the client so that it discovers the network. If the AP will turn itself off if the WPS signal will turn off the WPS signal once a client is connected, or if the time limit is up, which is often 2 minutes or less, to minimize the window that an attacker could connect. And next up is Attacking Wireless Networks by David Washburn.
So in the first half of this video, Matt showed you all the wireless security protocols to date and detailed information about each. In this second half, I'll be talking about the various methods used to crack each of these protocols. As most of you know, Wi-Fi networks are very easy to crack given a little bit of technological skill and the right amount of tools. In doing my research for this video, I was actually able to find out that each one of the protocols listed has been able to be cracked, with WEP and WPS being the easiest and WPA Enterprise being the most difficult. Here I mentioned GPU accelerated attacks have made this more simple in recent years. I'll talk about that more later on in this video. In order to try and crack a Wi-Fi network, there's a few basics that are required. With the exception of a WPS attack, you need a good dictionary, also known as a word list, that contains several passwords and permutations of these passwords. Or if you want to attempt a brute force attack, you need a set of rules to create the passwords that you're going to use for your brute force. There's programs later on that I'll describe that will create these for you, but you need to think of the rules that you want to use to create the words. In addition to that, you need a 4-way handshake, which is what you use to brute force or use a dictionary attack against. Thankfully, with the ability to inject deauthentication packets and the fact that most people continuously have devices connected to their network, it's not hard to capture this 4-way handshake. I've included a basic graph on how this process works, but I've avoided going into the intricate details for the sake of time. In the comment sections, I posted a link that fully describes the process if anyone's interested. Once you have these basics, you can start looking into the various ways to crack the password. The first method I wanted to discuss is cracking passwords with your CPU. This way of cracking is somewhat outdated and definitely much slower than more recent alternatives, as CPUs have a limited number of cores. The most popular program in recent years is AirCrack. AirCrack contains a suite of tools, all of which can be used to aid the cracking process. It's still possible to crack networks with AirCrack, but most only use it to capture a handshake or send deauthentication packets when needed. Reaver is specifically used to target devices that have WPS enabled by brute forcing the pin key space. My research tells me that WPS only has 11,000 possibilities, which makes cracking WPS relatively a simple process, especially if they don't have any rate limiting to slow down the guesses. The next program I wanted to talk about was John the Ripper and Crunch. These are mainly used for brute force attacks. They accept a set of rules and they'll just generate permutations based on that rule. So you can give A through Z, uppercase, lowercase, and 0 through 9. It'll generate a terabyte word list if you want it to. A lot of times people use this to pipe the output into other programs to attempt to crack. The last program I explored was Wi-Fight. It attempts to be an all-in-one solution, but my research and experimentation with it had little success, so I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to try and do this. The next and most recent way of cracking I wanted to discuss is using GPU acceleration. GPUs are much better for cracking because they contain hundreds of cores, which means they can make many more guesses than a CPU could get in a single second. GPUs are dumb in the sense that they can't perform complicated operations, but they're very good at performing simple operations very quick. The two most popular tools for GPU cracking are Hashcat and Pyrit. Hashcat has many more options available, but in terms of cracking, their speed is about the same. I know from first-hand knowledge how boring it can be to sit through slide after slide of this information, so I wanted to give a demonstration of using GPU acceleration to attempt to crack a password based on a handshake capture. Before I go into the demonstration, though, I wanted to mention a few things given my research. It's not easy to do with a MacBook. I have a MacBook Pro. I attempted to do this, and my CPU and GPU both got hot, and the motherboard essentially just shut the laptop down before any damage could happen. So researching around, I saw that Amazon, as many of you know, has plenty of cloud servers out there you can use, and they have a GPU instance that you can rent for $2 an hour, which wasn't ideal, but then I realized that if you're a student, you get $50 in credits when you sign up, so I figured why not give it a try. And just before I go into the demonstration, I'll also mention if you don't feel like dealing with the complexity of all this stuff and you just want to upload your 4-way handshake capture, you can upload it to a site like Cloudcracker, and for $17 they'll just go ahead and attempt to crack it for you. I think they said they had a 300 million word list or a 6 billion word list, so if you wanted to do that, that's an option too. Now I'll go ahead and give a quick demonstration on using Pyrit on an Amazon EC2 GPU instance to attempt to crack a Wi-Fi capture. For the sake of time, I decided to not go with Pyrit and instead use Hashcat, so I wouldn't have to worry about downloading a huge word list on a server. So as here in the AWS dashboard, you can see that I started a G2 GPU large instance, which means it has 4 GPUs running on an instance on Amazon Web Services. Like I said before, if you're a student, it's free up to $50, so you can play around. They're pretty easy to launch. Right now, they seem to be having a lot of issues, and also when I ran through it before, it was taking 15-20 minutes rather than what you guys watch it crack for 15-20 minutes. I just recorded the output from an earlier trial, and I'll go ahead and go through that and explain some things. So here you can see executed after I got everything set up. I included links in the description to show everybody how to set this up, so if you want to try it yourself, you can. But once you get everything installed, you have Hashcat, and then it's called CUDA Hashcat, so you can use the GPUs. And the -M2500 tells it that we're going to attack a WPA or WPA2 handshake. -A tells it that we're going to use a brute force method rather than a dictionary attack. And this is the location of the HCAP file that I copied over from my local machine. This here at the end is part of a mask. It's part of a mask attack that tells it, I think that there would be, because I know the password, I can cheat a little bit to save some time, but it says that there'll be 3 digits followed by 5 or 6 lowercase letters in the password. Then once we get started, you can see it's got my 4 GPU cores here running, and gives you a little bit of information about them. And then get started, and then the first status output says that each GPU is running around 40,000 guesses per second, or hashes per second I should say, and the speed of all of them combined is around 165,000 hashes per second, which is much better than I was getting locally. With Aircrack, I think I got maybe 500 guesses per second, so it's exponentially faster. You can see I keep hitting the status, and it tells me how many entries we're going to see. So there's quite a few entries given the input, and as we scroll down through here, I obviously impatient, kept hitting status to see where things were, and after 13 minutes and 4 seconds and roughly 129 million guesses, which isn't, for 13 minutes isn't too bad, it arrives at the password, the pass key here. Like I said, I was able to cheat a little bit because I knew the format of the password, but for a brute force attack, even knowing the format, to accomplish that in roughly 13 minutes is pretty impressive. So yeah, that's our presentation. Hope you liked it. Please feel free to look at all the links I included in the description. to try some of this out yourself.